I'm sitting here with Dave Ferguson, pastor of Christian Community Church in Chicago and the president and CEO at Exponential Conference, actually Exponential Movement, I would say. Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think you just did. Yeah, so I lead a church in Chicago. It's a multi-site church, kind of like Salt Church. But then we also have a church planting movement called New Thing that I provide vision for. But then Exponential, which we're here for this conference, I also provide kind of leadership for that. And then I also get to write some books and do some other things.
Write some books, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. Because I started coming to your conference here about 10 years ago, and we met the first time up in Stavanger around 2010 or something like that. Yeah. We had some spaghetti in a private home there. But I have really connected to the way the whole exponential community works, your style of leadership, and what you want to accomplish. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the big idea about exponential? What is the drive behind this large conference that you're president for?
Well, I mean, you've heard me say this a lot of times, and just for those listening, we talk about exponential as more a community with a cause than it is really a conference or an event of any kind. And our cause is all about multiplication. Because when we look back at Acts, what we really see there is not kind of this like the church as an organization or as an institution or even a place to kind of outsource your spirituality so your kids can get better ethics, although it does a lot of those things. What we really see it as the church as a movement. And so you look at Jesus' vision for the church. It was in Acts 1:8, it goes, hey, it's going to start here in your Jerusalem, and that might be Bergen, it might be Stavanger, but it starts in your Jerusalem, then it goes from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. What Jesus was describing was a movement. And so for us, the exponential, like how do we actually restore the church to its original ethos of movement?
That's probably why it really connects a lot to me. This, the fact that you want this to be a movement.
Yes.
I lead the Pentecostal movement of Norway, and I'm very keen on telling our people back home that we need to stick with that name, movement. Tell us about why is movement important?
Because movement is in our DNA. That's who we were meant to be. Even part of my own story, I grew up in something called the Restoration Movement, and candidly, even though it wasn't really a movement at the time, what it did for me though, by using the language as a young person, it told me, but even when we're not that, that's who we're supposed to be. That's what's in this. That's what's in the Bible. That's what's Jesus' dream. And so I think for me, it gave me access to language that said, okay, this is who the church could be, and I would very much encourage, yes, to keep that language.
That resonates a lot with me. I haven't seen that much movement in our movement, but it's still the ideal for us that we want to see the Church of Jesus move forward. One of the big challenges, though, Dave, is the challenge of where do the next generation of leaders come from? After I took on the leadership of our denomination, our movement, this has really become one of the biggest tasks. So when you wrote the book Heltemaker that we have now translated into Norwegian, I thought this is a message that we need to hear. How can the book Heltemaker challenge us as church leaders and ministers to raise up new leaders?
Yeah. At the core, what Heltemaker does, it really challenges each of us to see ourselves not as the hero of the story, because all of us kind of see our lives as kind of this unfolding story, and a lot of us, we would like to kind of be the hero. But the greater opportunity, and also going back to what you also said, the way to get to movement is when we begin to see ourselves as a hero maker. So instead of me going like, okay, I'm going to be the hero of the story, no, you begin to identify other people in your church, other people in your life, and saying, you know what, I see something in them that God put there, spiritual gifts that God's put in there. I see something that maybe they don't see in themselves, and then you begin to pour yourselves into those people. One of my mentors, a guy named Bob Buford, he would phrase it this way: my fruit grows on other people's trees. You know, my fruit grows on other people's trees. And so it's not about me, but what the greatest difference I'm going to make is in the lives of other people. And when you have that mindset, that's a hero maker. And back to what we were talking about before, that's the stuff of movement making. I would even say, I mean, I think you look at Jesus. Jesus was a hero maker. I mean, in John 14:12, he said, you know what? These things you've seen me do, you're going to do even greater things.
Right.
Greater things than these. And some people push back and go like, well, hold it, isn't Jesus our hero? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he stretched his arms and died on the cross. But if you look at his leadership style is he pulled together 12, working class guys and said, you know what, I'm going to make sure you do even greater things than I do. You're going to take the gospel to more places around the world than I ever did. You're going to be the ones who are going to write the Bible, not me. And he poured himself into them. And what did he cause? A movement that we're still benefiting from. And so really the whole emphasis of the book is how do you really not be the hero of the story, but try to make other people the hero of this grand narrative.
Might it be in the DNA of the church or the movements? Because when I look back about 100 years in Norway and I look at how laity was placed into preaching roles, ministry roles, I mean, it was a rise of leadership that was kind of like, it happened as a move of the Spirit. It was like, it was a normal thing to do. What we're facing right now in many of the denominations in our part of the world is that the recruitment is really low. And I'm asking the question for you now, how is that situation in North America?
I don't want to pretend to know how it would compare, but my hunch is we're probably in a very similar situation where what it demands of us as church leaders, and when I say church leaders, I don't just mean like paid clergy. I'm talking about anybody who has any influence in the church, as volunteers, as lay people. What it demands of us is that we begin to look, around the room in our church buildings when we're gathered and go like, hey, that young person there, I see a gift in them.
That's what you call the I see in you conversation, right?
In English, we say this is the 4 most important letters of a leader's alphabet. I see in you. And I bet, I'm going to ask you about it in a second, I bet there was somebody in your life when you were probably a younger person who saw something you didn't see in yourself, and they had that, hey, Øystein, I see this in you. I know I had that. There's a couple different people I can look to. One of them was Bob Buford, I mentioned his name before, who saw something in me and invested in me, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and challenged me to be even a better leader. Okay, so here's the question. Quick story, who was that person for you?
It was my youth pastor, Daniel. It was my teenage leader, Kjell. It was my Boy Scout leader, Bussen. It was the co-pastor in our church, Sverre.
Yeah. And so that's interesting because there were both people who were paid clergy, paid pastors, and there were also people who were volunteers. And those are people who saw something in you didn't see in yourself. And here's the thing I hope everybody gets to. Maybe, and Øystein, I'm sure you'll be humble about this, but the incredible influence that you have, that maybe never happens if those people don't see that in you. And see, I think in faith, what it requires of us is to look around the people at our own local church and go like, okay, who are the next generation? And have those conversations, to have those intentional conversations. Because in some ways, we got 5 practices in the book, Hero Maker, and all of them are really important.
They're all really important. And when you were with us in November 2018, the year the book came out, you met our SENT conference for church planters.
Awesome.
14 denominations and movements together, and they all welcomed it because it resonates in the history that we have. We say that in the Nordic free church environment, we promoted the people that we saw God had laid his hand on. And I think that book that you have written, now as we get it translated into Norwegian and we can work with it there, I hope it's going to energize a new I see in you movement so that new leaders will be raised up.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, while they're all important, if they only get one of them right, is how do we consistently have those kind of conversations with the next generation? And it's not just even just kind of like pastors to the people or teachers in the Sunday school classes to people, but even parents. How do you have that with your kids? I see how God could use you. That's a game changer.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I'm so honored for the opportunity to translate this book into Norwegian. How many languages now, the book?
I think a half dozen.
Half dozen, that would be 6, and then you add the Norwegian, that's 7. And Norwegian is going to be the heavenly language so that you can count in all of that also.
Amen.
So we are so honored, Dave, that this book is now in Norwegian. We're so blessed by your ministry. It really resonates with how we think about church and how we think about movement. And I'm so glad that we get to be inspired by you. And we want to continue on praying for you and read your stuff. The book Exponential was also translated into Norwegian. That was your second book?
Second one I ever wrote, yep.
I love that book. That book has meant so much to me, and it has meant so much also to other Norwegian people. So thank you so much, Dave, for this chat. And I hope that we will all read this book and be inspired.